So first of all, we need to understand what is a web server. You know, so when you develop applications as a dev, you want to ensure that people are able to access your application. So you need to find a way of basically distributing your application to anyone who is interested in interacting with your application. So for that, you need some server kind of application. That's why we have a web for web-based applications. So we call it a web server. So in a web server, there's quite a number of things that can happen on a web server, or that you can manage to do on a web server. Number one, you can do the storing of the files for that application. Um, so the file stored here, and they are run on this server. And then so the running bit and the processing, because users will be sending requests. Yeah, so there's a request from a user. Some user is somewhere here sending a request to the server, and the server needs to respond with the response. Yeah. So you remember we looked at if this application is based on the HTTP protocol for communication. So basically, it will request for a resource, and the request can be in a number of forms. The user can send a GET request, or the user can as well send something like a POST request. Yeah, can send a delete request, and so on and so forth, or update, because the user wants to update the data, his data, so needs to send an update or patch. So these are what we call HTTP methods that are used to interact with the web server. Of course, it can be in form of APIs. So the user will send that, and so this your application files will be stored on this web server, and they'll be running on this server. So this server will do the running and processing of requests, and of course it will respond, and that means it will do delivery of whatever the users ask for. So basically that's what the server does. It stores files, runs those programs written in those files, and then based on the action of the user, process the user request and respond accordingly. So there are different types of applications that can be stored on a server. So we have web-based servers. So you can have web-based applications. You can have also mobile-based applications, desktop, right? Or you could just like store APIs. That's just like some backend. Yeah. So a RESTful backend. So this backend can be used by any of these applications. So the client-facing web or mobile or desktop can always talk to. All of them can talk to this backend RESTful API. Yeah. So we just expose the APIs, and that's all. Yeah. So there's a lot that our server can do, and there are different types of servers for different things. So but in this case we focus more on the web server, web-based application, that is. So we just look at the web server. Even with the protocols like DHCP, you can host that on a server. Yeah. For files, FTP, mail, you can have a mail server. Yeah, and so on and so forth. But in this case, we just focus on a web server. So basically, we host web applications on our web server, and by so doing, we allow clients to access those applications and interact with those applications. So basically, at the end of the day, we have a client server kind of architecture. Yeah, where the two communicate to each other. So the client will send a request, and the server will respond with a response. Yeah. So that's the client server model or architecture. So we have the server here with the API, and then we have the client who is the browser. So this is client interacting via the browser and consuming some backend API somewhere. So there's some concepts that maybe you need to know about the web server. Maybe I'll not mention all of them, but there's what we refer to as document root. And what document root is, this is it's a directory, a root directory of documents that can be served. Yeah. So once you host your application on the server, you have what you call a root directory. Yeah. It's just a directory, like the origin of every file in your every file and other subdirectories. So it will have subdirectories. It will have files that are not in any directory. So everything in your all the directories and files in your file structure will be hosted in the document root. Yeah, so it's just a root directory of anything that is servable, any servable document. So it can have HTML files, it can have JavaScript files, it can have CSS files, it can also have Docker files if you're using Docker. Yeah, so it will have all those things. If you're having a folder of images, so you can have an image folder where you're storing all images, because you can't scatter all your images everywhere. And if you're having some PDF documents you need to serve, you can have a PDF folder right there with those files in there. So all those will be contained in the root document, which is like the main folder that contains everything here. And in here you can have files and subfolders. So that is a document root. So when you are hacking, you look for the document root, so that way you can traverse it and be able to access different sections of the application being served. And then we have server root. And what the server root is, so we have the server running, but then the server in itself needs to have for the server to run, it needs to have some files that actually so those are files that run and make it a server, make the server what it is, right? The server configuration files and whatnot, all those are contained in the server root. Yeah. So the document root is in the server, but then the server, for it to run and to operate accordingly, it also needs to be configured. It also needs to run some program, because the server is just as a program. So that the program files for the server and the configuration files, all those are contained in the server root. So it's also a directory of all code that actually implements the server, because I said server is just an application. So it will store the config file or the configuration files, the logs for the server, because sometimes you might want to know why the server fails or how the server operates or functions. So you need to store some logs for the purposes of configuration or optimizing the server. And then it has, of course, the executable files that needs to run to enable the server to be operational. So those are server root. And then of course we have also what we call virtual document tree. And what virtual document tree is, these ones, you know, with servers, we want our servers to be scalable, especially and since scalable in this in the sense that in case we're storing information in our server, once our disk space, our physical disk space gets filled up, we want to come up we want to have some sort of a virtual disk space to store the rest of the files. And so that's why we need a virtual document tree. So it's used when the original disk becomes full, and so it's normally located on a different disk, possibly on a different machine. So it's not on the same machine that is running the server. So we have another machine that is capable of offering some disk space to this server in case its space gets filled up. Yeah, so we want our server to continue to be operational at all times, even when by accident, even when the disk space is full, we want it to still be up and running. Yeah, but then we want it to, once the disk is full, we want it to switch to some virtual disk somewhere. So we need to have another machine that is capable of offering the disk space, the virtual disk space. And then we also have so this virtual tree goes can be easily confused with virtual there's what we call virtual hosting. So what is virtual hosting? You can host multiple sites on a single server. Yeah, so basically that's it. So hosting of different sites on a single server. And you've seen this, so shared hosting, sometimes I think it's called shared hosting, can be a form of shared hosting where we have different clients hosting their sites on the same server. So the same server just partitions space for different clients. So that is shared hosting. So they use the same disk for storage and whatnot. Yeah. Well, so that is shared hosting, and then before I forget, there's what we call web proxy. And web proxy, this is just some web proxy, or sometimes you'll hear people talk of HTTP proxy. It is one and the same thing. So this is just like another server placed in between the real server and the client. Yeah. So we have a client here, you know, the client server architecture, and we have the server here that serves the client. But then we don't want this client to just hit this server directly, so we install some sort of a proxy server here. You can call it HTTP proxy. Yeah. So most of the times it can do cache of the site. It can cache the content of the contents of this main server. So let's say this is the main server that we don't want people to directly interact with it. So it will cache the contents here. So in case the client needs anything from the main server, instead of getting it from the main server, that client will have to go through the proxy server first. If that content is not in the proxy cache, then the proxy cache will request for the content from the main server, and then the main server will respond, and the proxy server will update its cache and respond to the client. So next time the client asks for the same information, the proxy server will just respond with what it has in the cache already, and it will always check to sync to ensure that the information it has is up to date with what is the main server. It can also be this architecture can be this way because for purposes of introducing some sort of security measures, so that if in case we have malicious guys, then they don't get to fully access the content of the main server. They'll always hit the proxy server. Yeah. So yeah, and it can be here for different objectives besides security and ensuring that the clients don't hit the main server directly. So that is a web proxy. So it just ensures that all the requests coming from the client go through the proxy to the server, instead of directly engaging with the main server. Now we have this open source web server architecture. I know you've heard of XAMPP, you've heard of LAMP. Yeah, this is like a framework that contains everything you need for a web server back in the days. So can someone tell me what XAMPP stands for and what LAMP stands for? Okay, I'll tell you what LAMP stands for. Most people are not aware of this, but most people use LAMP. I know most people use XAMPP. LAMP stands for Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. You should already be guessing what XAMPP is. What is XAMPP? Okay.
Cross-platform, Apache, MySQL, cross-platform,
Yeah, cross-platform.
Apache, MySQL, PHP, and Perl.
Yeah, great. So the rest, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. You said PHP or Perl?
PHP and also Perl.
Yeah, Perl is a scripting language. Well, so cross-platform because it can run on Linux, right? It can run on Mac OS. It can run on Windows. So that's why you call it cross-platform. It is platform agnostic. Like it can run on any platform. But LAMP is very specific. It runs only on Linux. We also have WAMP. So you can guess that is Windows. And then the rest. Yeah. So it's not just specifically meant for Windows. So these are some of open source web server architecture we have. Yeah. So but typically most places, most servers across the world, to be honest, run on Linux. So typically you'll get most servers on Linux OS because Linux is lightweight, number one. Yeah, and you can easily customize it to customize and configure it depending on how you want it to be, harden it the way you want it to be. Part of server hardening is ensuring that you have a minimum number of applications running on it. Yeah, unlike Windows has got so many apps running on it too. And Linux, so you can harden Linux. You can just ensure that it only runs on the terminal. You don't have any GUI, so it is just if you want to access this server, you want to host anything, you just use the terminal and terminal alone. And you can use things like SSH. If you want to the insecure way, you can use Telnet. Yeah, but people no longer use Telnet when talking to sensitive servers. So you use SSH via some sort of tunnel. Yeah, and you're able to host your applications and stuff. So you can harden Linux the way you want. Oh, we also have hardened version of Windows, but not to the level of Linux. So we have Windows servers like Windows Server 2016, 2019. I know the latest should be like 2022 or something. I'm not so certain. But those are custom-made Windows operating system for servers. Yeah. So we have Linux OS, which is most used, and another server that is widely used is Apache. Although we also have other types of servers like Nginx. Do you know of any other types of servers apart from Apache and Nginx? I leave you to Google that. You can go ahead and Google. You're free to Google. Different types of so another commonly used database is MySQL. Although nowadays we also have Postgre SQL. Yeah. the SQL based database, we have Oracle. Yeah, but initially, most people use MySQL, and that's why it comes with the stack. You can see it's part of this stack here. But you can switch. Yeah. And then the most commonly used language, I don't know, but that is shifting, was PHP. So most applications on the web were PHP based apps. So and that's why everything was bundled into one here to make it so easy for someone to easily build an app, store data, set up MySQL, set up PHP and the Apache server, and install it on Linux or Windows or whatever platform. So this were the mostly used open source can say stack for web-based application and server. So for Windows, I said that we have the Windows OS called IIS, which is Internet Information Service, which is just a web server application developed just for Windows. Yeah. Top of Windows here. And then so before you hack a web application, what is some of the things that you need to have in place? So we have, so basically we're talking of web server. So you need to do information gathering, or you need to do recall. Yeah. Right now you guys know a number of ways you can use to gather information, but then there are some unique things that you need to factor in when you are gathering information about websites. First of all, you want to know the technology that was employed when building that website, for instance. Number two, if you can get a copy of what you call robots.txt. Tech that was used. We have tools that you can use to just scan the website, and it will tell you the technology behind that web application. If you can traverse the directory list and get the robots.txt, or you can use some tools to gather this, because it's normally, this one is left in the open. It helps the robot engines to read more information about that site and help in the ranking and in looking for information on your site. So that's why it is left public. So the robot.txt file, get to see if there is any sensitive information that was left in there. And then, but there's nowadays this can be hidden. So if it wasn't hidden, then that means some security measures are not put into place on that site, and you can easily go ahead and even do what you call directory traversal on the site. Another place to look for information, maybe about the domain, who registered the domain, whose website that is, or web application that is, and the contact information if there is, the IP for that domain. You can get that information from the WHOIS sites. Yeah, and you can go ahead and even gather more information by just trying to run tests on. You can gather APIs from this running site if in case it is consuming or using some APIs. So you can test a number of. You can do the GET requests. You can try to do a number of requests, head requests, post requests, yeah, and so on and so forth. Delete, put. You can try a number of things to see how the website behaves. Yeah, but of the most risky ones include delete, because you might delete resources. Yeah, put and I think also patch and trace. Those, try to see if these methods are disabled Yeah, that if they're only enabled when you log in, and maybe if you have admin privileges and stuff to send some of these requests. So you might try out those. You can use Nmap with some script to scan and see how vulnerable this site is, because Nmap has that script. So that's the much you can do with information gathering and other things, of course. There is also you can also try to see if how you can do enumeration. So you have that domain, and you want to see if that server has the number of ports open. Yeah. So which ports are open, which services is there, which services are talking to the server, right, or are running on the server and stuff. So still you can use a tool like Nmap to enumerate that. And now considering that you already have the IP address, if you have the domain name, you have the IP address, you can get the IP address when you use the whois. Yeah. So yeah, try to see if we have any subdomains. So those are like virtual hosting, because we said with virtual hosting you can host a number of websites on the same server. So each one of those might be they might use subdomains, or they might also use some other domains. So it might be redirected to some other domains and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's the much you can do, and you can also grab there's what you call banner grabbing of the servers. And what a banner tells you, it gives you information about the type of for example, the type of what do we call, it can tell you which OS is running, which OS is the server running. It can give you the version of the server. Here we talked of so which type of server is it? Apache, is it Nginx? Yeah, however. So it will give you the type of server. Basically, give you server information, the OS it is running on, whether it's running on Linux or on Windows, whether the version of the server, the type of server it is. So that's the information that's contained on the banner. Most of the times when you're configuring your server, you don't want to expose some sensitive information about the version of the server and the OS. You don't want to lie. So this information can be deceptive, especially if the person was clever enough to give false information here. But when you use a tool to scan, it might be able to tell you, besides grabbing the banner, a tool like Nmap will tell you which OS it is. But on the banner you can change that. So I mean, the hacker can use different ways to verify that whether the information on the banner is true or false. So to gather information on the banner, you can use is it Netcat? You can use either Netcat, most of the times we refer to it as NC, or you can use a tool like which one was this other one? Telnet. Yeah, so just Telnet, give it the domain here, the domain name and the port. I think port 8 or something. Should be able to give you like the banner information of that server. So that will be done practical, and you'll be able to see. Another thing you might want to do with web servers, for software developers here, it's making a lot of sense for you. Another thing you might want to do is, let's say you want to take time to just look through the the structure of the client-facing application. You want to see what kind of other other domains maybe that server was talking to. Yeah. So you want to maybe just browse through the website at your at your own comfort, maybe offline or something of this. So you'll have to like grab the whole site, clone it basically. So you can use a number of tools to clone a site and then browse it online offline. So there's a tool called http track or http track, or it should be htt track, not http. There's what we call Black Widow. You can use these ones to just clone a site and then gather more information about the site while you are offline. Yeah. So web copier. Web Reaper, Surf Offline. I mean, there are a number of tools you can use for that, but HTTP Track was one of the pioneers. So the next thing, you might want to discover vulnerabilities before you launch your attacks on that web-based application, because what we've talked so far, what we've based our discussion on so far is on gathering information about the site. But what happens after you've gathered enough information? Now you want to identify vulnerabilities. Yeah. So how do you go about it? So there's a tool called Nikto. I know we have others, but this is the most common. So you can use this one to scan that website in question to try and see if there are anything to do with misconfiguration, because when we were starting this course we said lots of the vulnerabilities are configuration based. Yeah, so are there any misconfigurations? Is the web application running some outdated modules or stuff like that? Yeah, outdated modules. It might be authentication modules, it might be whatever module the developers used. So Nikto will be able to tell you whether there are any outdated third-party modules or modules being used that you can easily identify vulnerabilities and use those to hack onto that web application. Yeah, so Nikto, these are a crucial tool for you to learn how to use in identifying vulnerabilities on web-based applications. Another tool that you might want to use now to also scan for vulnerabilities and even launch attacks or prepare exploits is Metasploit. Yeah, so this one will do a number of things. It will help you to find vulnerabilities and create an exploit for that vulnerability. So it can do a number more than what Nikto can do. So prepare exploit and or payloads and exploit the site. Yeah, so it is a very important tool. So we'll spend some time also. I think we should just take time to show you how to use Metasploit to hack web application. And then you might also want to do, so let's say we have users who are already using the application. So you remember last time we talked about session hijacking, and that is done on web-based applications. So how do you do session hijacking, and maybe also do, because another thing you might want to do is crack passwords, because we have those, you've identified the login form. You want to see if you can use brute force approach, where you're guessing almost every other thing, or you can listen in on the communication, maybe try to gather if there is a username, see if there's any open plain text password. If not, you'd want to try and guess passwords, and then that means you'll have to use tools like Hydra. Is it no, Hydra is for reverse engineering, right? There's a tool here called yeah, it is THC. Yeah, it's okay. THC Hydra. I don't know that Hydra. Which one? That was EDA for reverse engineering. EDA, Gidra. These ones are for. Now I am getting confused here. Gidra is for reverse engineering. This one's done by NSA. Yeah. EDA was also for reverse engineering. So I'm not basically talking about. My focus is not on these ones. But THC Hydra. This one use it to dynamically crack passwords. And that means you use it on an application that is running, not locally running application, but the one that has been served on some web server. It can automate the process of guessing passwords and stuff. Yeah. Or you might want to perform some sort of what other. So session hijacking, you can use Babsuit. So this one can enable you to see the requests that are being sent, responses, identify sessions. So if you want to identify sessions and whatnot, you can use Babsuit for that. It's both open source and closed. So yes, yeah, you might want to perform a DOS attack just to ensure that that server is offline, is crashed or fails to serve the clients. That means that's a DOS. So you can use a tool like which was the Hulk. You can use Hulk DOS. There's another tool for a Microsoft tool for that is you can customize and use it to send HTTP requests. Remember the post, if you want to test the get, the post, the delete. So there is a tool called WeFetch. So this is send requests. You can use WeFetch. If you just want to do auditing on the site, you want to identify if to identify vulnerability. Of course, as a security person, you might want to do audit, but as a hacker, you might want to use the same tool to identify if we have vulnerabilities on the site. So you'll use a tool called W3AF. That is to scan the web application for security vulnerabilities. Okay, so we've looked at a number of tools here, from Metasploit to this other one was Nikto for identifying vulnerabilities and misconfiguration. Metasploit can do both, identify misconfiguration or vulnerability. Most of the times you'll find yourself using Metasploit or Babsuit to hijack sessions and to identify the sessions and even the sites that your web application is talking to, or resources. All that you can use Babsuit for. In fact, Babsuit you'll camp here a lot. You'll also camp here a lot. Yeah, and if you're doing any sort of dynamic automated password cracking, maybe you'll camp here also a lot. Use Hydra. Yeah, so these are some of the common tools. Yeah, so unless you guys have any questions, so what are some of the attacks that you can launch against web applications? For example, offhead, we have you can do SQL injection when you're trying to okay, you can do SQL injection. You're trying to talk to the database via the web forms, but then you're using the weaknesses on the form where we have where we have forms that don't have input validation on the client side and maybe on the server side. So you can easily launch SQL injection right there. And SQL injection is just a way to manipulate the database to give you information or to store some information that was non-existent there. So you can create a user in the database who is yourself, give yourself a password, and then later on use that to log in into the website and access whatever you want to access that you are not authorized to access through SQL injection. You can use SQL injection to basically dump the information that exists in the database. So you want to create a copy of that information, so you can use SQL injection to dump that kind of information. So basically SQL injection is targets the database. Web defacement, I hope I'm putting it the correct way. Defacement of the website. And what defacement is you are basically deforming the website. Is it defacement? You are basically distorting the website. So you've seen cases where hackers hack maybe our government's website or portal, and then they put the banner hacked by so and so. They delete the content that existed there and put their own content. So that's like website defacement. We have attacks like so some of these attacks we talked about them when you're looking at different attacks. We have session hijacking, and last time we just talked about that, so I'll not waste time here. You guys want to go for lunch. So we have session hijacking, cross-site scripting, if you can remember that, where we inject some malicious scripts into the HTML form. Do you remember any other kind of web-based attacks besides this one? Because you guys should be active. Any other? Well, so
Could you say buffer overflow?
yeah, buffer overflow can also be done from there, but then that targets the server, whatever code that's running on the server. So buffer overflow, great. And if there's any other one you can mention, I don't have all those overhead. Yeah, correct. So with that, I think we come to the end of this module, and before we come to the end, maybe we can look at some of as usual countermeasures. This is like one word. So countermeasures of web server hacking. What are some countermeasures that we can put in place to ensure that we secure our web servers from hacking? So okay, as usual, we have patch and update. Always ensure that you patch and update your server. That means the OS and the supporting applications that run there, so that in case there are any vulnerabilities, you get the latest patch to fix those vulnerabilities. Another thing, since we have things like session hijacking, man-in-the-middle attacks, and so on and so forth, that can be used to gather information to do with the user information. So encryption, encrypt data that is on transit and at rest. Anything that's being stored on the database should be encrypted, and anything sensitive that is on transit also should be encrypted. And we talked a lot about encryption, and we also have a topic on cryptography, and I think we'll be addressing that still. Another thing is ensure that your code can only be accessed by people who are supposed to access it. So enforce code access security policy for your code on the server. So you get that not everyone can access the code on the server, so ensure that you secure the code that's being stored on the server. Another thing you'd want to do is monitor the server through the logs you collect. So collect logs, ensure that there is proper logging of every event that takes place on the server. All the applications that run on the server do proper logging. Collect all those logs into some central server and filter through those logs to ensure that the events that are taking place are legit events and we don't have any weird activity going on there. In case you also want to monitor your files, so for integrity, so that in case there is anyone who's installing anything or changing files, deleting or adding some content onto your application files on the server, you want to be notified. So check the server files with just ensure that you have all the files hashed and in some way, so that in case there's any change, any integrity kind of attack where the content of a file has been edited by deleting or adding anything, you get notified. Traffic filtering, of course, you need to install, like we talked of firewalls and so on and so forth to enable you filter the traffic. So you will need to install, or you can use proxy servers and firewalls to help you filter the traffic that gets to your server, so that you only have legit traffic hitting your server and leaving your server. Configuration, use of default settings and passwords. So avoid using default configuration, server configuration. You need to configure that server to harden it. So that means do away with default configuration and default passwords, usernames and passwords. Make sure you don't use those. So those are some of the countermeasures, and I'm sure we have some more. And I think with that I leave that to you to figure out. Yeah, so you guys will handle the rest. We'll handle the rest of that. Another thing you might also encounter is sometimes you create accounts and you have unused accounts and stuff. Ensure that if we have those you do accounts audits. Audit the accounts. So if you have any unused accounts, ensure that you do away with those accounts. Basically delete or disabled. Sometimes it's not good to delete because the owners might want to use them, so just disable unused accounts. It's the same way you have an application and someone created an account and that person you monitor to see if that person is using that account. If that person has remained dormant for a certain period of time, you just disable the accounts. The same thing that happens with the accounts, social sites like Facebook and so on. If you don't use your account for a certain period of time, it's considered what? I'm forgetting the term now. That means also should be looking for lunch. Well, dormant. So if your account is considered dormant over a certain period of time, then it is disabled. It might not be good to delete it, but some places they delete your account because they need the space, especially if you're storing a lot of content there, heavy files and stuff. And there are some other things that you can do at the infrastructure level, at the network design level, where things like where do you place your web server? You might want to place your web server in a separate secure server. So you do something like segmentation, network segmentation, to ensure that you don't have your server like in a place where every other person within the network is. So these are the people in the network. You put them in their own subnet, and then the servers and whatnot, you put them in their own subnet, network segment, for ease of management and for ease of enforcing security control or policies. So we have different layers of security too. So it's recommended to have at least 3-layered web application network. You need to have we have the internet, and then we have the DMZ, and then of course you have like the internal network. So this is multi-tier architecture. So I think you saw this. So if your web server is serving the rest of the world, you might want to put it under DMZ, and it doesn't have sensitive information, then you put it under DMZ. It's just there to serve a web application that ensures for your web presence. But if your web application is meant to handle sensitive data that is used within the internal network, then you might have that website not in the DMZ facing the rest of the public, but you might have to have it internally in the private network, so it's only accessed by those within the internal network. So the same thing, you at school, there are some applications that you can't access from the public network, and if you need access to them, you need something like a VPN, which creates a tunnel for you from the public network into the private network. So you use something like a VPN or a proxy. So this at the network architecture level, how you can handle issues to do with the server. But you might also place the server at the DMZ because the DMZ it isolates your server from both the public and the private network. And so based on the configuration, you can serve the content accordingly, either to the public or to the internal network. So in this case, when you have this multi-layer architecture, the 3-layer, the internet, the DMZ, and the network, you in well secured network environment, you get that the internal network will have like its own. From the internal network, we'll have a firewall. So you have a firewall here, and then from the external, you'll also have another firewall. You saw an example where we had like 2 firewalls, right? So this other firewall takes care of the traffic from the internet to heading to the internal or private network, and then this other firewall takes care of any outbound traffic from the internal network to the public. It will just like look through the traffic to ensure that the traffic doesn't carry any sensitive information that should not be exposed to the public network. So that way we don't have data leakage. We've had cases of data leakage where we have sensitive data being leaked to the public internet. So we don't want that, and that firewall, its function is basically to check to ensure that any traffic that's emanating from the internal or private network doesn't carry any sensitive information that we don't want exposed to the public network. So there's quite a lot there, but basically I think if with that information you should be able to easily understand any other architecture to secure the web server and the network at large. Yeah, so you saw us looking at the different types of firewall architecture. So this is where now you apply those concepts. Another thing to under the countermeasures we have, you might need to secure your ports. So if there are any ports that you're not using, you need to shut those ports down. So, and that means audit your ports. Try to see which ports are up and running, which ones are not. So you'll have to constantly audit the ports. Yeah, you can do scan by yourself internally. Use secure ports too. For example, instead of using port 80, that's HTTP, you might resort to using a port like 443, yeah, which is HTTPS. There's another thing, if I forget to mention it will be too bad, but most people don't talk about it, or most people forget, and that is the issue of certificate. When you do hosting, when you host an application, you have your domain, you've bought your domain name and you've hosted your application so on people can access it on a certain domain. You need to buy a certificate, yeah, for that, and this certificate is what you call a digital certificate. So this one enables so you need to ensure for the validity of the certificate data, ensure that whatever data that is used to for the creation of that certificate is up to date and is correct, yeah, and also that you also have to ensure that your certificate is always up to date, yeah, so the certificate expires after some time, yeah, so you have to take care of that, ensure that you update your certificate as soon as it expires. So there is this digital certificate, and this digital certificate is important because if you are planning to do encryption of your data, this is the certificate that is used because it carries the public key. So when you'll be looking at which is that module, cryptography, I think we'll look at this concept of digital certificates and how and what importance they are in terms of the encryption process of traffic from one end to another. Yeah. So always ensure that your digital certificate is up to date, because sometimes if it is not up to date, you will get issues. People will have issues accessing the site and encrypting information and so on and so forth. So I think that marks the end of it, and maybe one thing, so also ensure that you configure your server properly and the application stored there, to ensure that if there is any error messaging, you don't expose the error messages, technical error messages to clients, because it can expose a lot of sensitive information about the server and the vulnerabilities that exist. So you want to ensure that if there is any failure on the server side, that message is you have a way of communicating the information to the users that doesn't expose the sensitive information. So you can come up with custom messaging to the client that doesn't really expose the technical errors that exist on the server side. Yeah. So you can have this nice looking messages like there is an issue on the backend the admin is working on, something of the sort. So just like, sorry, there is a problem on the server side, or there's some problem on the admin side, and the admin is sorting the issue before the you know how to put it. I mean, there are different ways to communicate that when you're handling your application. Yeah, so that it doesn't expose some of the technical issues that are on the server, because when a hacker gets that, then they can easily tell, this server is failing because of this and that, and this can be exploited so easily. Yeah. So that is it. And lastly, maybe you look at how to secure Windows server. Let's leave it for you. Things like disabling tracing, turning off debug compiles, because you have debug compiles. Debug compiles are just like related to error messaging, because give you the debug messages and stuff. You need to turn those off to ensure that clients don't get those errors. You remove unnecessary, we have what you call ISAPI, extensions and filters. Remove those, allow custom web request handling and exploit heavily, then yeah, so allow custom web request handling and so on and so forth. So look at those under Windows Server. So I think that marks the end of this module, unless there is any question from you guys, and I think I've talked quite a lot until I can feel it.